If it was possible to slow down the aging process, would you want to know how? And if there were certain changes you could make to your lifestyle that would support your ability to obtain optimal health at any age, would you want to learn more? Welcome to C60 Health Connections, where we meet with leading experts in the health and wellness space. I am so excited about today's conversation. We are going to meet with my friend, Dr. Lisa Koche. She's basically a biohacking genius, and maybe a little bit like Dave Asprey, except for better because she's an MD. Lisa is a triple board certified medical professional, founder and director of Spectra Wellness Solutions Clinic, owner of Lit Labs Performance Center in Tampa, and an author and nationally recognized speaker. Dr. Koche is a truth seeker, paving the way for access to unbiased science and medical freedom. Ever since her own exposure to the medical field due to childhood leukemia and heart failure from chemotherapy, she has been focused on finding the root cause of disease rather than just treating symptoms. She specializes in anti-aging and biohacking through regenerative, traditional, and functional medicine. She focuses on all aspects required for total body healing, including nutrition, hormone replacement therapies, and enhancing mitochondrial function. She has lectured nationally and been featured on numerous podcasts, radio, and TV segments across the country. Through her years of research and perfecting her model, Dr. Koche is now focused on bringing her techniques and skills to the world through her online membership, the publishing of her second book, and her upcoming Practitioners Training Academy. My name is Jessica McNaughton, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at C60 Purple Power. I'm a business executive with years of experience in corporate America. And for more than 20 years, I've been exploring various modalities in health, wellness, and spirituality. Now, before we get started, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. Any products or topics discussed today are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate any disease. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce you all to my friend, Dr. Lisa Koche. Lisa, so great to see you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right, let's dive right into it. Will you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a biohacking anti-aging expert?
So I would love to say I just thought it was sexy and learned it and put it into play, but it was the universe leading me one step at a time. So that it all started at the age of 15 when I went for a camp physical, was feeling totally fine, and was told that I had a pretty severe anemia. And that led to a diagnosis of childhood leukemia. So I spent the next 3 years of high school with chemotherapy, intrathecal, which is basically right in the base of your spine, chemo going right into my brain, bone marrow biopsies, all kinds of insanity. And I was lucky enough to make it through using traditional medicine and still be able to graduate on time and actually have a good high school experience for the most part, other than the wig because I lost my hair. But when I went for a first ever pap smear at the age of 20, they found a mass on my ovary and the whole journey started over again. We thought it was a cyst, and I woke up in the recovery room and it was hidden leukemic cells. So when my family took me up to Sloan Kettering in New York, and I started chemo all over again instead of beginning my junior year at Emory. And I had already decided at that point I wanted to go into medicine. I thought that I wanted to treat kids with cancer at that time. And when I went through my junior year of further chemo and then promptly into heart failure because of the chemotherapy, as I interviewed for my medical school applications, one of the first people that interviewed me said, "You really want to do that? Are you sure?" And he caught me off guard. And I said, "You know what? I don't want to do that at all. I don't want anybody to have to go what I've gone through. I want to figure out what makes this vessel work and how to keep it that way instead of treating it once the disease has occurred. So he was kind of the first one to help me flip my thinking. And even with all of this chemo through high school and college and these health complications from the chemotherapy, I was still able to graduate on time and to get into a prestigious medical school. I was at Emory University in Atlanta, and I stayed there for medical school. And when I started, I was so excited because I figured, you know what, I'm finally going to get the answers. The why me, like, why did this happen to me? And we'd go through rotations and we'd see patients and come up with a plan. And every time I made everybody crazy, my residents, my attendings, because every time I would watch these people come in, they'd have a multitude of symptoms or diagnoses or problems. We'd put them on some type of protocol. We'd scan them, do labs, and then we'd treat them. But it didn't seem like we ever figured out their why either, right? So I just kept saying, okay, I understand these treatment protocols, but why? Like, why did this person have this problem? Where did this come from? Why are we treating it this way? And they would just say, this is just how we do it, right? Like, there was just nobody knew. So I made a decision at that point too, that I was going to try to help people, including myself, figure out why they got sick and try to unwind it from there. So I started my practice with that focus. I went into internal medicine because it seemed like the broadest approach. We didn't have options for functional medicine, then. We still don't really, but this was like kind of the broadest way to look for the why with patients. And as I started my practice, patients would bring in ideas to me about like more aggressive treatment of thyroid or some out of the box ideas for hormone therapy. And then I would just go and look it up and pursue it. So I started my own fellowship program. I knew prevention of cardiovascular disease was something that was also very intriguing to me, not just cancer prevention. So I knew a lot about the heart, and cardiologists wanted me to go into a fellowship, but to me, that was just a bunch of procedures that I didn't want to do to people because I'd had so many procedures done to me. So instead, I went the path of obesity medicine and trying to understand vascular and why people got heart disease. And that exposed me to a lot of nutrition and to a lot of psychotherapy that goes behind cardiovascular and obesity in general. And I created a whole protocol to help people going through gastric bypass, which was really interesting. And then I would watch people go through this extreme surgery for their weight. They'd come out on the other side with an improvement in that side of things. And maybe their blood sugar was better and they got off some meds, but then they had this whole hormonal cascade that was really off, and they were exhausted. So I just kept saying my favorite question, which is, okay, but why? And at the time, the surgeon got mad because he didn't care. He wanted to keep going. And he said, you went on this tangent studying functional medicine. And I said, yeah, you've got all these people that we don't know now why their systems have shut down. So it was a combination of the patients leading me along this path, my own curiosity, and then the constant teacher, which throughout my lifetime has been my own body. So I was lucky enough to get pregnant. Nobody knew if I could because I had only one ovary. They had to remove that one when I was 20. And it had received 5 years of chemotherapy. So when I had my daughter, I got pregnant the first time, and that was amazing. And after, I carried her just fine. They were worried about my heart, which did give out a little bit at the end. But after I had her was when a whole cascade of new things popped up. So I got Hashimoto's and psoriasis, and I couldn't open my eyes because I had pain, and they told me I needed eye surgery, and I did go for sinus surgery. So I found myself in a sort of interesting spot where I had done a lot of out of the box healing. I had been feeling really pretty good. I could run a 15K, even with all that cardiac events that had happened prior. I had this healthy baby, and I felt awful. So I went to the traditional endocrinologist. I went to an eye specialist who told me I needed surgery, and I had some happy to share the adventures there because they were fascinating. It really showed me what normal human beings going through our traditional medical system have to deal with. But it pushed me to continue my out of the box research and journeying into what we can call biohacking. So, the word is a little bit overused, but it just means, how do we go into these bodies and find the best next way to heal? And maybe it doesn't look like what everybody thinks it should look like, because most of us are trained in looking for relief of symptoms more than we are looking for the why.
Wow, that's so amazing. I love having this conversation with you, because you've been through some of the toughest things people can go through in life, from leukemia to heart failure to Hashimoto's to having psoriasis, pain in your eyes, multiple surgeries. You've had a robust and really impressive, academic upbringing and professional career, and I think it, your curiosity and your interest in your own personal life experiences, coupled with what you're witnessing in the clinic, in the hospital, day in and day out, and in the academic space as well, and really coming to the conclusion that the field isn't necessarily asking the why, and then that's the critical place that we need to start for all things health and wellness. So, kudos to you, and thank you so much for being a leader and a trailblazer, and really kind of bringing together traditional medicine with functional new medicine, and then weaving in additional modalities and new technologies that are leading edge and experimental sometimes, to really come up with protocols that support total mind, body, spirit healing and rejuvenation. So I think this is really exciting. So you said that biohacking isn't necessarily how the traditional use of the word, I'm stumbling here, but that basically it's how we figure out the best way for our bodies to heal, correct?
Yeah. And I think the stumbling really is what a lot of people like. It's just not a word that most people can relate easily to. So I think it's a word that in mainstream has kind of been represented by people that like live off the land, that never make a mistake, that are these like chiseled, no body fat, able to stay in freezing temperatures, humans that don't seem like they are realistic. And what I'm trying to do is show humanity that no matter where you are, the goal of this is to go inside your own body, figure out what is best, the next step for you, to just go from wherever you are right now to the next place. So whether you're just starting, and I call this the initial phase, the healing phase. And I have about 11 different pillars that I play with of health. And the first 5 or so are when you're just getting out there and you're really ready to take care of your body, what you need to focus on first, and then understanding that that's just the basic foundation. So we can go to levels of performance, which involve more spirituality, more energy medicine, more cutting edge, like really out of the box things that we can do to heal the body or to elevate the body's function that we don't even understand yet. So I say healing, performance, and beyond. And the key piece for all of that is something I've had to learn more recently, which is the importance of connection. And I think connection to the highest version of yourself and connection to your story and connection to others is imperative when we are trying to get ourselves really on that path to the next level.
Okay, so when you're in phase 1, in the healing phase, and you're trying to get clarity around, what's best for you, and if you're new to this idea, this concept around biohacking, maybe you've seen some influencers on the internet who seem very successful, and they spend all their spare time experimenting with their body, and maybe you're just a regular person and you're like, hey, I'd like to optimize my health, but I don't know where to start. And I certainly don't have the time or resources, to commit to all this. Can you walk us through what's the beginning process? What would it look like for somebody who's like, hey, I want to put my toe into the biohacking space? What do we need to do first, and what should we focus on first?
So to get into that biohacking space, in my opinion, you need to first look at your gut. So that's not as sexy as cold showers and, and doing light therapy. But if our guts are not healthy, then any of these other next level therapies and interventions they're just not likely to have any impact. So when you take a look at your nutritional state and the status and health of your GI tract, understanding that it's a huge surface area, if you haven't worked on getting the bacterial balance there and detoxing your liver and making sure that the lining of the intestine is healthy, that's where you really need to start. Because in this day and age with antibiotic usage and environmental toxins and non-steroidal Advils, like really all of us have issues with our gut lining at this point, unless we have taken a specific attempt to work on it. So I would say always the gut is where we would start. And then making sure that you're looking at the basic hormonal systems in your body, your thyroid, your female and male hormones, and your adrenal gland. So those need support. I like to describe it almost like a stool. And if any of these legs are not holding their weight, they will pull the other ones. So making sure your practitioner is looking for things a little bit more than just a basic TSH, which is the basic thyroid number, or they're at least asking or suggesting things to support your stress gland, is going to be really important. And potentially looking at estrogen, progesterone, testosterone levels. So we want to make sure all of these basics are supported, because with stress, which is another one of my core pillars, if we're living constantly in fight or flight and feeling stressed, and, over the past 2 years, most of us, it's very hard not to be pulled into even the collective stress that we're feeling. That pulls your system, meaning adrenals, thyroid, hormones, the health and status of your mitochondria. That's just going to pull everything. So wanting to take a look at that as well, and looking for outside of the box tools to help mitigate stress, things that maybe you haven't tried before, connecting to the earth, like just working on ways to bring that level down while we're trying to get all of these healing pillars supported and balanced.
Okay. So what are some basic things that people should do to support gut health? Or do you recommend we just cut out gluten? Should we take a probiotic? What are some of the really practical, simple things that are easy to implement kind of day one?
So day one, absolutely, gluten is not a fad. Gluten-free is not a fad. Gluten on this, in this, our country right now, and in a large part of the world, is being grown in a way that's contaminated with glyphosate, which is Roundup. So when I have patients completely remove it from their diet, and remember that's wheat, but it's whole wheat and white wheat, white flour. So you're going to do bread, pasta, cookies, crackers, cakes, things in bags and boxes. You need to be reading. And if you want an alternative, there's plenty of gluten-free options that taste good. So getting that specific compound out of the diet, but it has to be for 2 to 3 weeks, not just lowering the amount you're eating. Just do this experiment. You will not be sorry, where if you completely remove it, it's enough time for the antibodies to go down, and then you can go out and eat it and see how your body responds. So that's basically free to try. And the impact, I've had patients come back and one say to me, oh my God, I'm so mad at you. And this is her second visit. And I'm like, oh God, what did I do? And she said, I've been fighting with my sister for 5 years about gluten. And I finally did it, like you said. And within 48 hours, all my joint pain went away. My rash cleared up. I don't have a headache, and my diarrhea stopped. So that's like an extreme example. But most of my patients will see enough of a benefit. They'll also realize that avoiding it is not that hard. And then they just will stay off of it. So absolutely gluten. And unfortunately, it's really hard to do both gluten and dairy. But the cows are now being fed genetically modified gluten in their feed, genetically modified everything and gluten in their feed. So it's kind of getting into the milk. So most of us are doing a pretty good job on milk substitutes, like almond, coconut, oat, but also the cheese is where it's really tough. But I think minimizing dairy as best as you can, getting off the gluten is a number one for me with patients. And then in terms of supplements, absolutely a good quality probiotic. Usually it needs to include several different strains. So we have one that has some of the basics, but also something called Saccharomyces, which is a strain that helps with yeast, because the other side note is almost all of us, if we've not really focused on the gut, will have an overload of yeast compared to the good guys. So I kind of describe it as the inmates ruling the asylum, where the probiotics are supposed to be in charge. The good guys are supposed to be in charge. And just because of a combination of processed food, alcohol, antibiotics, just this long history of toxin exposure, the yeast and bacteria tend to overtake. So getting a good quality probiotic, and then working, usually with patients, we'll have to work on knocking down the load of yeast and bacteria. So there's different supplements that can do that. And then a good quality powder that is got glutamine in it, which is the number one nutrient to help heal the lining of the intestine when it becomes leaky. So we have different packages for the supplements that can go together to help heal the gut. But those are all a good place to start.
Okay. So is the the overgrowth of the yeast plus the bacteria, is that candida?
So candida is the yeast.
Okay.
Bacteria is something different. So bacteria is just the bad bacteria that's not supposed to be there.
Okay. So how does that show up? Like, how would you know? Are you going to have like itchy ears, or are you how would you know?
So that's a great question. So overgrowth of yeast and candida can present with lots of different things. One of the most common, and what happened to me, is an intolerance to alcohol, which is just kind of out of nowhere, where you're doing okay, and then you have wine and you feel like, whoa, I used to be able to have a glass or two of wine, and now I feel totally hungover and headachy and foggy. That can happen with sugar intake as well, but yeast in general, brain fog is a big one. Cravings for sweets, another huge one. Definitely lots of gut symptoms can be involved. Definitely lots of rashes. Yes. Itchy ears. Yes. Vaginal yeast infections, but not always. You can have a lot of nail fungus, headaches. So the hard part is a lot of these symptoms can cross over with other issues. So it's, just sometimes having to do either stool testing, or we do a lot of muscle testing, so that we know when the load has lowered enough that you can just start getting off of these supplements.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's say you get your gut health dialed in, and then you want to look at your hormonal symptoms, and you want to get your doctor to help you check out your levels for thyroid and adrenals. Are there certain tests that people should be asking their doctor about? Can you talk to us a little bit about, like, how do you vet and qualify whether or not you're working with the right practitioner to help you dive into these things?
Well, one way is to seek out a functional medicine trained practitioner. There are some different websites that we could put in, maybe in the show notes, but I would say if you go in educated, a lot of docs will be willing to at least order what you ask for. They may not know exactly what to do with the results, but at least you can get the information. So you would want to ask for a full detailed thyroid panel. So I like to look at TSH, free and total, T3 and T4, reverse T3. I usually check iodine levels and antibodies to screen for Hashimoto's. So I know that's a lot, but again, maybe something we can include listed in the notes.
Okay, great. That's helpful. All right. So once you've taken a look at that, then what's the next pillar? Is that the mitigation of stress, or is there another one?
Well, we talk a lot about the adrenals. So, yes, mitigation of stress, which there's tons of different modalities that involve connection work, that involve different ways to meditate or deep breathing techniques, yoga. The adrenals, all in addition to working on the stress, which can activate the adrenals themselves go through a whole spectrum of kind of dysfunction. So they may start by pumping out fight or flight, like this high levels of cortisol, and then over time they get pooped out. So then you may get like dysregulated, where it may be super low in the morning, but then shoot up high at night and keep you up. And eventually, chronic stress will lead the system for the adrenals just to be flatlined. So having an idea, and practitioners can help. You can do saliva testing, you can do muscle testing. Having an idea of where you are, I describe it as the adrenal townhouse, where you don't really want to be in the front door, but when you're in, which most of us are, you're either completely tanked in the basement, up and down on the ground floor, or you're like living kind of in the penthouse, which is still not a great place to be. There may be different supplements that can help support the gland depending on where you're at.
Okay. So what are some key signs that you might have adrenal burnout or fatigue?
So one of the main ones is waking up in the morning feeling like you haven't slept. That's a big one. And then there's a classic 3 p.m. crash. Many times people also wake up at 3 a.m. There can be cravings for salt. Yeah. And also a lot of lightheadedness, especially with, going from a lying to standing position, can lead to pretty classic symptoms of what feels like just dizziness, orthostatic. They describe it as symptoms of just, I need to take a minute. I feel like I'm getting a little black when I stand up, especially too quickly. And being very sensitive to whether or not you've eaten. So kind of a roller coaster where I can't go too long without eating, or I'm going to feel really hangry, and those types of symptoms that can also be an adrenal, symptom.
Okay. So, I know there's a lot of supplementation you can do to support that, but if you're noticing some of those things, what are some like lifestyle choices that people could make to kind of support lowering the stress, kind of helping yourself calm down, and maybe start the process of addressing, some of the things that you might be doing unintentionally that are causing, an increase in stress and stress on your adrenals.
So I think there's a couple things you can do that are more lifestyle mediated, like what I was saying in regards to eating. So somebody with a real significant adrenal exhaustion should not be fasting, because it will just trigger more stress. So getting to know where your body's at, and maybe if you are really crashed, understanding that actually eating every couple of hours, you're more likely to not gain weight, which seems counterintuitive, but like dialing into the food related piece, using some sea salt in your water can really help a tired adrenal gland. And then there's lots of supplements, just like you said, depending on where you're at, whether they're glandulars or adaptogens like ashwagandha, which is my favorite. Those can be utilized to help. Lifestyle wise, I think some of my favorite tools are something as basic as journaling. It seems passe and everybody's talked about it, but there's something about the pen to paper that actually does trigger relaxation in the brain. And I have different ideas on things to journal that we share with our patients. Also, getting connected to nature, incredibly powerful. So whether that's, putting your feet in the earth, whether it's being outside in the morning sunlight, which are two of my favorite things, whether it's leaning up on a tree, there's lots of different ways to connect to nature, but this will help mitigate some of the overabundance of cortisol that many people are dealing with.
Those are all really, useful and practical tips. Do you have any recommendations for like a nighttime ritual or routine? Should we be turning off the television, getting away from the blue light, like those types of things to help kind of support you getting ready for a restful night's sleep that is lasting and, not interrupted?
Yeah. And I think always hitting on sleep to understand the importance, because sleep, inappropriate, non-restorative sleep will pull down all of these pillars. So I think that's an absolute must to work towards if you don't have it already. And then if you have it, to maintain. For sure, lots of data on the blue light bothering sleep. So getting off devices, I prefer at least an hour prior. Some of my really sensitive patients to EMFs, we'll have them turn off the Wi-Fi in the house, and you can get people to come in and install like a timer so that it's off at night and turns back on in the morning. Yes, as well, the TV, especially with all of the kind of fear mongering in the media, and that's going to clearly impact sleep in a negative way. I personally like to soak. So if you have a tub, and it's better to use a small tub, so the tub that has the shower attached to it, if you can get in that and put like 2 to 3 pounds of Epsom salt, which is what I like to do. If you can do that for 10 minutes or so, soak and then rinse off. There's something about the crystalline nature of the salt that helps to clear the energy field of stress and trauma and the day, to let you be able to connect to self and relax. And I've seen it really improve sleep. Plus the magnesium in it will go into the body and has a calming, impactful, like a way to impact sleep in a positive manner. So soaking, meditating, and you can turn on, even though we don't want you on devices, you can go on YouTube, find some free guided meditations and just turn them on out. Maybe sometimes I'll put them in the bathroom, put the phone in the bathroom, and I can still hear it. And it will just be enough to get me kind of into a breathing, meditative place to fall off to sleep.
For the Epsom salt, did you say 2 to 3 pounds or 2 to 3 cups?
2 to 3 pounds.
Wow.
So I buy this big bag.
A very salty bath.
It is. And it's if you throw in, you want to make sure it's plain Epsom and not the fragrance added, because a lot of times those fragrances are chemicals. And then you can throw in a couple of drops of essential oil. So doing the heavy duty bath, maybe you do that one twice a week, especially after a super stressful time. If you're an empath, really sensitive to others' energies, this is even more helpful because it will clear whatever you've taken on. It helps clear it out of your field.
Okay. Awesome. Those are really great tips. Right. What next pillar should we explore?
So we've hit on a lot of the healing, other than there's one left, which is infections.
Okay.
So many people have chronic infections like Epstein-Barr, and that is the monovirus that most people have been exposed to in their lifetime. And it can hang out. So really right under the radar, as long as your immune system is holding together, it can keep it suppressed. But when you get excessive stress, it kind of pops out to play. And when that happens, you can get this cyclical exhaustion. Sometimes people will get cold sores, or they will get swelling up in their lymph nodes in their neck. So getting the right practitioner to help you explore if that could be involved can be really helpful. Okay. We're seeing a lot of reactivation of Epstein-Barr with the current COVID paradigm and things that are going on, because whether it's post-COVID or post-shot or anything that's getting people really worked up, it's kind of an invitation for these old viruses that have been hanging out to show up again. And we can treat them and support the immune system. We have different homeopathics that we use, and herbs like monolaurin or quercetin that can be helpful.
Are there any certain tests that you should ask for? If you think you're suffering with a chronic condition or infection?
So you can do blood work to see if you have antibodies to some of the more popular, like Epstein-Barr, cytomegalo, human herpes virus 6. There's mycoplasma. There's a handful that can do this. Chronic Lyme kind of falls in this category. When the testing is not the greatest for chronic infections, in my experience, we have a lot of luck with muscle testing with a naturopath that's with me in my office. But you can also, in some cases, especially with Epstein-Barr, just go by symptoms and just go for some treatment, which is not going to hurt anything to support the immune system and work on some antiviral support.
Okay. And you should be working with a functional medicine doctor, or you can just go to your regular doctor. What do you recommend?
Definitely with looking into chronic infections, that's going to have to be a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath or somebody that is willing to really go outside the box to look for, these potential infections that people usually will not address.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So those are kind of the healing pillars. And then what I find is kind of there's several tiers, but two main tiers of patients that work with me. So one will be this person that's just getting started with all the pillars we just talked about. But then I've got the patient who comes in who has done a lot of functional work, who eats really clean, who may have found that the diet that they ate for a while was working on their body, not just from a weight loss perspective, but also just feeling good. And then all of a sudden they're gaining weight, or their brain fog is back, or they're just tired again, or they can't get to the next level at the gym and they were doing well. So those people, I kind of put more into my performance pillars, which are things like optimizing mitochondria, evolving the nutrition. So looking into what may be right for them now, maybe wasn't right before. Looking at detoxification in a slightly different way, looking at our DNA and how maybe we can support it in ways that we hadn't thought about. And then looking energetically, spiritually, at frequency healing and some of these things that are a little bit more beyond into quantum biology. So that's constantly evolving and really exciting, and where a lot of the biohacking thoughts kind of come in with light therapy and frequency healing.
I love that. All right. So will you give us a real basic kind of education on those different modalities that are available? You've got Lit Labs in Tampa, and I've had a chance to go there and I loved it. And I wish it was in my backyard. So you've got cryotherapy, you've got red light therapy, you've got a salt room, you've got a whole, variety of different tools. Will you tell us just a little bit about what's available and kind of going and becoming more mainstream in quote unquote, like the biohacking space? Yeah. And like, what can people expect, from from exploring these different modalities?
Well, I think a really great analogy that helps people understand is if you look at olive oil or at wine, the olives and the grapes that make the tastiest, most coveted olive oil and wine happen to be those that have withstood the most stress, which is really, really interesting. So like the grapes that had been through a drought are likely to make the best wine. So it turns out that humans have that exact same capacity. So we have forgotten that because when it's cold, we put a coat on or we go inside. When we're hungry, we can go anywhere and eat versus, having to hunt and gather for our food. So we become in effect lazy in terms of turning on these genes and triggering what we call mitochondrial biogenesis, which means we can actually make new mitochondria, which are the engines inside our cell. We can actually make new ones if we go through a little bit of stress. So most of the modalities that are at our center and most of the things going into the concept of biohacking and performance and optimization have to do with little micro stressors. So if I stress my body by being 3 minutes in a -170 cold chamber, the old cells that aren't working anymore are going to die off. And what's going to happen is the body then goes into this repair phase where it says, wait, this has challenged us. What are we going to do to respond? And it turns on these great genes and it triggers new mitochondria and it's turnover. Same thing with certain light therapies. And we are starting to understand that our cells have what's called biophotoreceptors. And those are literally receptors that respond not just to hormones or the typical signaling that we've learned in biology, they respond to light. So that is a whole new field that we are just beginning to understand.
That's awesome. So what about salt?
Yeah, I love salt because, again, the crystalline nature of salt allows it to do things we don't fully understand in our energy field. So we have our physical body, but we also have part of our body that it can extend up to like 8 meters. And that is more energetically sensitive. And as the science kind of catches up, understanding that this crystalline nature of the salt is allowing that energy field to work more impactfully and be more effective. So salt is grounding, meaning it will connect us to the earth. It also has properties in and of itself that are antimicrobial, meaning it kills off bacteria, yeast, viruses. It helps with allergies. It helps with your sinuses. So it's aerosolized, meaning pumped into the air. So we breathe it in, but we also can put our feet in it where the acupuncture points on the bottom of our feet can like benefit from being connected to the salt as well.
Very cool. And I understand you also have some different kind of electromagnetic pulsing treatments and things that you can do. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we have different our cells respond to energy, which is the basic understanding that most people in traditional medicine is still not fully accepted. So we have almost like these batteries that when we introduce magnetic fields can charge up the battery so that the cells work more efficiently. So there are different devices that can put this charge back in, like almost like you're just plugging up to the battery to charge yourself up. And sometimes the benefits we'll see everything from detoxification to improving pain to healing fractures to working on energy levels can be pretty dramatic.
Awesome. And then what's the benefit of inversion?
So, I mean, just anything that's going to increase blood flow to parts that don't always get it, things just get stagnant. So I think laying and turning upside down and using boots that enhance lymph flow, that's a pretty basic one of just when we improve microcirculation in places that it hasn't gone, we can access toxins, we can get rid of, again, cells that have turned over that aren't really doing anything. And then it makes room for the triggering of new cells to come around because our bodies are very innately intelligent. They're actually beautiful because they know what to do when given the right challenge, the right scenario, the right blood flow, when they're treated right. And that's why, again, all these fancy bells and whistles are not going to do anything if you're driving through McDonald's and staying under fluorescent lights and living a stressed out life where you don't sleep. Then there's no point. That's why we always have to start with the healing pillars.
That makes a lot of sense. You've got to really embrace the healthy lifestyle choices and then tack on these additional modalities. I'm glad you brought up the lymph because I forgot about that. Will you talk to us just a little bit about kind of the importance of keeping your lymph moving and what are some simple things that you can do? If you don't have access to a squeeze machine, could you just get a small rebounder and use that in your home? Or talk to us just about lymph.
Yeah. So the lymph system is a system of fluid that is supposed to travel all around kind of like your blood does. And interestingly enough, also you have energy meridians that travel all the way around as well. So I believe movement, we're meant to be in movement. Movement is going to help support all three of these systems. And by movement, obviously anything as basic as going for a walk. But in terms of lymph specifically, things can get kind of stagnant in the lymph system and make you more prone to infection and chronic swelling and fatigue and like those types of things. So movement with a rebounder is a great idea. There's also now vibration plates, which can help your bones as well as move the lymph. Those are relatively inexpensive. They used to be really high price point, but they've come down. So standing 5 to 10 minutes on a vibration plate can help all those systems as well. But just to start out, where if you're working, let's say at a desk all day, maybe you set a timer and you're just getting up. Maybe it's jumping jacks or yes, a little rebounder, like a little trampoline. Those are not expensive and you could just hop over, move everything around. You're going to find that by moving the lymph and the blood and the energy systems that your brain's more clear, your mood is better, you will have more energy. So that's a great easy hack that's not expensive.
That's awesome. Cool. All right. So if somebody's interested in trying cryotherapy, are there any counterindications with age, or like talk to us a little bit about like who would be an ideal candidate to try it and who should probably just pick something else?
So cryotherapy is one of the most extreme, in my opinion, in terms of the microstressors for the body. And so I usually make sure that we're talking about, I call these two patients, Sally is just starting out. Joe is my guy who's already been through everything and he's just lost his edge. I usually leave cryo more for the Joe types who have done a lot of the basic work.
People focus on performance specifically, right?
More on performance. Because if you're Sally and you're still not eating great and you haven't worked on your gut, you haven't worked on detoxification at all, and maybe there's some chronic infections. If you go in the cold and you introduce this massive stress, your body does not have the capacity to use that to trigger new cells. It's going to be just added to the pile of already overwhelmed stress that's there.
Okay.
So that's just a general recommendation. I do think also if patients have active cardiovascular disease, it's not a great idea because, again, it is a pretty massive stress. I find even for me, and again, I've had some cardiac issues, but I'm doing overall really well now. But if I get in the chamber when I'm not on top of my game, like maybe I hadn't been eating quite as well, or I had something very stressful occur at the office, or I just was feeling tired because I've been pushing it. If I go in the cryo at that point, it's a very different outcome than when I go in where I'm like on my game, training, feeling really good. Then it's like, wow, I'm on top of the world. I feel great. I want to do this 3 times a week. Versus the other way, I'm going to be tired for a few days. And then it's like, is this really helping?
Right.
Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of intuitive work that needs to go in where that brings in the connection piece of understanding your body. Where are you at? Understanding what's likely to help, what's likely not to.
Yeah. For Sally, what are the modalities that might be most appropriate to start with?
So for Sally, if she's going to go into a biohacking center, I would say the pulse electromagnetic field. So potentially charging the battery, but in very small doses. The salt, you really can't go wrong with salt, no matter where you are on the journey. I think it's supportive. And then we also have an infrared sauna. So infrared saunas are great because they allow detoxification without stressing the liver or other detox organs. Again, something you would want to start slow if you're a Sally, whereas Joe could handle a longer period of time in the sauna. But I think that would be another good thing to start with.
Okay. What's your perspective on just for overall health and wellness, infrared sauna versus a traditional sauna?
The difference is that infrared is going to allow you to access the deeper visceral fat. So the goal of these saunas is to sweat out fat soluble toxins. What does that mean? It just means a lot of the stuff that we are exposed to in the environment, whether it's gasoline products or phthalates or pesticides, they're so toxic that the body will immediately try to hide them away. And what the body does is it shoves them into fat because that's an easily accessible place to put the toxin. So what the infrared does when it's added to the sauna is it allows the heat and the light to go deeper, and then it can reach the fat that's closer to our organs so that it can access those toxins that are hidden deeper to get those to come out with the sweat.
Okay, awesome. I want to shift gears a little bit. I've heard about this term euthine. I'm wondering if you could tell us what is euthine and why is it important?
Well, euthine just means the act of aging in reverse. So I like to believe that we have not even begun to tap in to our full potential as a species. So, you'll hear other people talking about this, that we think with some of these new treatments, like what we just have been discussing, that our life expectancy could go up to 110, 120, 130, even higher. Mm-hmm. And so the euthing word, in my opinion, is just that exploration into what's going to allow us to not only extend life expectancy, but we don't want to live that old if we're not enjoying ourselves, right, and if we're not healthy. So this vessel has to continue serving us in a great way if we want to experience the gift of extending our life. So all of these modalities we've been talking about are part of the process. There are new testing kits and things that are out that are very exciting. So this is technology since 2019, looking at something called DNA methylation clocks that I'm really, really interested in. And I know you've heard some about it as well. But when we can look at the rate at which we're aging, when we can look at how old our eyes, ears, brain, and our current biological age versus what it might say on our birth certificate, very often they are not the same. And just even the idea that we can have an age that doesn't have to be the number that we celebrate on our birthday is right. What's really exciting.
And it's really exciting if you can figure out the tips and tricks, tools, modalities, the things that you can do to support your health that turn that clock back. And so then you might be 45 years old or 55 years old, but the actual age of your eyes, your heart, your lungs is chronologically much younger. And that's really, really exciting when you can see that and find that out and figure out what you need to do to support yourself with this reverse aging. So I know that mitochondria optimization is part of what's critical to kind of cracking the code on this. So let's talk a little bit about mitochondria and kind of, what do you recommend people do to support their mitochondrial function?
Well, I like to tell the story about my daughter was in 8th grade studying biology, and she asked me to quiz her. And she handed me the packet to read off to her. And when she told me it was about mitochondria, I was all in, right? Because I was studying it, really wanted to refresh it because we learn about it more in high school and junior high than we do in medical school. So she hands me the page and I'm turning these pages and I'm like, oh my God, this is all about the plant. You told me it was mitochondria. And she looked at me and said, Mom, the chloroplast and the mitochondrial, they look exactly the same. What's the big deal? And so I look at the picture and what the chloroplast, which is what the plant uses to take energy from the sun and turn it into food for itself, and what we use for energy, which is our mitochondria, these engines that are inside almost all of our cells, they are very similar. So one of the most basic ways to think about what you can do is to think about what helps a plant, which is healthy light. That's why, and there's certain frequencies, especially red light, that are very beneficial. But Getting early morning sun is another one that really helps our mitochondria. You want to be outside without sunglasses, not staring at the sun, but allowing some sun to get in your eyes. And then water. So the plant needs water. We need to be adequately hydrated. And there are ways to help the water get more more intracellularly and have it be more charged per se, which you can throw a handful of blueberries or squeeze half a lemon, and that helps water enter this something called the fourth phase that we can talk about another time, but that helps the mitochondria work better. So you want, again, what else does the plant need? It needs the earth. So we've talked about grounding, and then one last point, which is there's a lot of studies and reports, you could just search it online, where if you speak kindly to both water or a plant, how it grows more rapidly and beautifully versus if you try to bully it. I was listening this morning to a course I'm taking, and they were talking about how some kids did this as an experiment at school, where they were talking about bullying. And so they had a plant that they bullied and a plant they were kind to. And to watch the dramatic difference in how the plant responded is pretty eye-opening. So that just brings in the mindset, which is one of my performance pillars as well, one of the last ones, of where, how are you talking to your own mitochondria, and who are you surrounding yourself with, and what do your relationships look like? Because if you're doing things that are supportive, you have a massive edge in that youthing department for your mitochondria.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. It's such a good reminder too, about speaking kindly to ourselves and the thoughts that we put in our head. What a cool experiment for kids and adults to try alike.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to us just a little bit about, you were so passionate about seeking truth in medicine.
Yes.
In this weird world that we're living in through, the pandemic flu and all that, there's just been so much suppression of truth in medicine, and the dialogue and the debate that has always been kind of the foundation of science is just gone. So I'm really curious, without us going too deep to a point that we get kicked off this platform here. I'm just curious about, tell us a little bit about ways that you yourself and also your recommendation for others for how they can seek out truth in medicine and truth in information, and really get down to the heart of the matter and not just digest propaganda.
Yeah. So I think because I was gifted at such a young age with my experience, and because I realized through everything I've gone through that if I had just accepted what I was being told by traditional medicine, if I had accepted that narrative, I would not be sitting here today. Because I went outside of the box, because I found ketogenic diet 10 years before it became popular and it helped my mitochondria, because I kept asking why and found light therapies again many, many years ago, is why I'm now training for a half marathon, which is just absolutely incredible. So I think the combination of that and the combination of some of my own spiritual journey of having to learn to trust myself and not just be a people-pleasing accommodator, which is what a lot of healers and females in general, but a lot of men as well, what we kind of default into in this society. So I had a lot of experience already. So when this narrative about the virus came out, I was, after about less than 24 hours of uncertainty and being a little nervous, like everybody was, I just was able to put my critical brain on and say, the way that they're talking about this, it doesn't make any sense, because this is an outpatient problem. We have ways to treat things, and people were coming up early on with that was the incredible side, was here was something nobody knew about. And then you saw these people all over the world coming up with treatments that were working. It was so beautiful. And that's medicine and that's science. And so I started treating with some of these modalities, and I was very quickly censored. Pharmacists were blocking my prescriptions. one of my videos went viral to over 2 million people, and I was able to speak on a couple of bigger platforms about just seeking truth in a non-biased, non-political way. And for me, politics has no place in science and medicine. And I really have spent a greater part of these past couple of years grieving my profession and then trying to figure out how to help it, because I love medicine and I love the purity of science. And the whole point of it is to ask questions and to assume that we don't know the answer. Because again, that was me at 15 with my why. So what I've said, and I've really managed to stay in somewhat of a neutral ground, because out of my 8,000 patients, I've had people through these couple of years, and we didn't even close for one day. We were lucky enough in Florida, to stay open. We weren't seeing active COVID. That was on telemedicine, but we had patients coming in pretty much the whole time. So I learned early on what the impact of uncertainty was having on humanity. And I was able to step into more of a neutral space holding energy and hold love, understanding that people are waking up at different paces. Like not most people do not have the gifts that I had of, these incredibly severe medical problems that required the combination of traditional and integrative, or they haven't experienced a lot of the relationship / spiritual journey that I had done. So I just decided to hold the space, provide the treatments, speak truth, and not hold on to what could be going on in terms of agendas and conspiracy, and not give in to fear. So what can you do? And my advice would be to kind of sit with your own intuition. And that's been the biggest gift of this pandemic, I think, is when you're faced with uncertainty, the only thing that you have that's certain is you. So going within and allowing yourself to feel the emotions that come up when we're facing it. And I've faced them as well, which is fear and grief and a lot of anger, exploring that. And again, journaling or finding a close partner or friend to connect to, meditating, working with a therapist, working with a shaman or a coach. I have one of each. So that would be something else I'd say. It's, it takes a village. We don't feel like you have to do all of this on your own. There are professionals that can help. There are modalities that can help. So the final message with regards to this topic would just be knowing that there's more than what we have been presented with, trusting your intuition. When you listen to people, take a minute to tap in, because we just talked about mitochondria and plants and how we respond to words. So we actually have this innate ability to know the truth. So if we allow it, if we sit in our own intuition and just allow ourselves the respect that, wait, maybe we actually can feel what's right and what's real, that can make a huge difference as well.
Oh, that's such a good reminder. I love that. Yeah, we're definitely navigating through this bizarre time that I don't think it's ever going to change. I mean, the world's always going to be volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and filled with ambiguity. And I think that really tuning into your intuition, like you said, your gut, and just one other thing too, I think, is just doing research, seeking out opposing alternative perspectives if you feel really strongly and polarized about something, like use your why. Why do I feel that way? If I feel triggered or whatever, like why? What's going on here? And if people's voices are being shut out and they're being highly censored, also ask why, because there might be something there that is worth your time exploring. So you talked earlier at the beginning of our conversation about connection. And I'm just curious, talk to us a little bit about why connection matters when it comes to healing and also to improving the level of performance. If you're somebody who's performance oriented, how does connection connect to performance?
Well, one of the easiest explanations is my I've partnered up with a connection coach out of Denver near you that you met. And we have a device that can measure your biological age based on your blood vessels and how resilient they are. And so it's a quick, easy scan. And when he and I met up, it was because he's helping me finish up my second book. And we decided that a lot of his modalities that he was using and my modalities were very complementary. And when we got together for an event that we had where we were going to combine a lot of the mindset connection work with the physical work, we did each other's biological age. So I did mine, and he and I are the exact same age, same year, a couple months apart. And mine was about 8 or 9 years younger. So I was happy about it. You know, I would like it to be more, but it was okay. And then he puts it on his finger and he was 24.
He was 24 years old?
Uh-huh.
What?
So I was like, okay, wait, what? You still eat gluten? Like you got,
what are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah. So we were he's so present in his work. He is in connection to people all day long. He really is in connection to himself. And through the work that I did with him to write the book, he asked questions. And through this modality that he uses, you're connecting to yourself for sometimes in the first time in a long time. So I noticed as I was working with him, that connection to myself became stronger. And then that allowed me to have a lot more control over my mindset, my stress response. Indirectly, that's helping my hormones balance, the mitochondria more optimized. So we've made this workshop that we do all over now about using both the physical tools, but making sure that the connection to others and to yourself is present, because that just gives you, it's almost like a ninja skill that really pushes things just another level up.
And I have to imagine that this also probably impacts your ability as a medical professional to connect with your patients and help people optimize their performance as well. I'm assuming that you're probably getting additional benefits from this that are being directly applied to your day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's heightened my intuition, and I use that skill when I'm sitting with people, asking them more targeted questions, for sure. And I think when we do our events, we usually end with one of his signature things that he does is called council. So it's like an old fashioned tribal council where we're actually sitting in connection in a circle, and he will ask questions and people will answer like very vulnerable things. So the last one we were at, a woman shared that she got more promiscuous after her divorce, and she ended up with HIV. And it was just so beautiful to watch everybody hold space for her. And then everybody, like multiple, and this was high level entrepreneurs, multiple other people started sharing their vulnerabilities, and the impact of shared community and shared support of being authentic. This pulls in the truth again. Is really immeasurable, because it's something you can't achieve just on your own, like that connection to other humans, in addition to connection to that highest version of yourself.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. So on that note, I think we should help people understand how they can get in touch with you, how they can come to your programs, work with you online, come to your local events, possibly swing by Tampa if they're in the area, and go to your lab, try out your different modalities. So will you tell us, give us the rundown here.
If you're in Tampa,
like I said, we're going to put everything in the show notes too.
Okay, great. So if you're in Tampa, yes, please check out Lit Labs Tampa. We are really trying to combine all these modalities with connection there. As far as workshops and events, Greg and I are doing workshops in a few different cities, and we're going to have a retreat, crossing my fingers, in Costa Rica in October. So we'd love to have everybody join us.
And today, I'm just going to put a little note in here because this recording will probably be released 2 or 3 weeks from now. But today is January 28th, 2022. So potentially in the fall of 2022.
Yes. In the fall of 2022, we're going to be doing an event in Costa Rica, combining biohacking and connection. And then as far as my further work in terms of youthing and healing and the performance pillars, I am working on my online course that will walk you all the way through healing to performance. We have opportunities in the office for just being a patient if you're in the Tampa Bay area, where we can look at all of these things. But then we have the transformational journey that's a 6-month hands-on with me that I will kind of walk you through everything I have done for myself. And then we're also starting a new performance package where we're working with peptides, this methylation, DNA methylation, and all these modalities that we've been discussing today for DNA activation and mitochondrial optimization.
So cool. All right. So your primary website is drlisakoche.com, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then spectrawellness.com for your clinic.
Correct.
And then litlabstampa.com for the biohacking facility.
Yes.
And then how do people find you on social media?
On social media, there for Facebook and Instagram, it's Dr. Lisa Koche.
Okay. And Coach, just so you guys know, is spelt a little different. Koche.
Yes, except for I am coaching you through healing to performance. So it works, just doesn't spell that way.
I love it. That's awesome. Okay, awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. I have learned so much today, and I greatly appreciate your time. And I'm excited to see what happens next. I know you've got so many exciting projects that are going to be released and revealed this next year. You guys definitely need to get on Lisa's social, follow her so you can stay abreast of all of her exciting announcements. And I highly encourage, if you are in the Tampa area, go check out Lit Labs. I took my best friend there a couple months ago and we had the best time. She happens to live in Tampa and I can't wait to go back and visit. Check out drlisakoche.com and spectrawellness.com and open up our show notes to learn more. Lisa, thank you so much. Really greatly appreciate your service to humanity, everything that you're doing. And thank you for educating our audience today on all things anti-aging, biohacking, and mitochondrial optimization.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
It was fun. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Sounds good. Bye.